The supermarket on the edge of Manchester buzzed with the nervous rhythm of Christmas Eve. Trolleys clattered, tills beeped, and the air smelled of pine-scented detergent and roasted chestnuts from the stand outside. In the middle of it all stood Michael Weaver, chief executive of a growing tech firm, his 6-year-old son, Oliver, sitting in the child seat of the trolley, humming a carol under his breath. For 3 years, Michael had done this ritual alone.
Since his wife's death, Christmas had become a duty, a list to tick off rather than a season to feel. He bought the finest turkey, the priciest wine, all the trimmings. Yet each year the house felt emptier. "Dad, can we get the big turkey again?" Oliver asked, pointing at the mountain of wrapped birds glistening under the fluorescent light. "Of course," Michael replied flatly. He reached for the largest one, a free-range Norfolk bird with a golden sticker, 79 times. Money never mattered anymore. The silence at home did. They joined the queue at the express tills. Ahead of them stood a young woman in a worn-out NHS coat. Her name tag read C. Thorne. Beside her, a little girl clutched a hand-drawn picture of a Christmas dinner. A smiling family around a glowing bird in the center. The girl's cheeks were red from the cold. Her shoes were too small. Michael noticed her only when Oliver tugged his sleeve. "Dad, that lady's sad," he whispered. Michael followed his gaze. The woman, Clara Thorne, looked down at a frozen turkey in her hands. 34,099. She hesitated, then set it back into the freezer, her lips pressed tight. Her daughter's face fell. "Mum, Mrs. Harris says everyone has turkey on Christmas," the little one murmured. "I know, sweetheart," Clara answered softly. "We'll have our special pasta instead, remember? With extra cheese." She tried to smile, but her voice trembled. Oliver kept watching. When the beeps of the till faded, his small voice rose clear across the queue. "Dad, that lady can't buy a turkey for her kid, but everyone should have turkey at Christmas, right?" The words cut through the air like glass. Clara froze. A flush crept up her neck. People turned. Michael felt his stomach twist. Shame, sympathy, something nameless. He wanted to explain, to apologize, but the woman grabbed her shopping, pasta, sauce, milk, and hurried away, her daughter's hand in hers. Oliver looked up, confused. "Did I say something bad?" Michael swallowed. "No, son, she's just tired." He watched them leave through the automatic doors, the child's pink coat disappearing into the blur of snow outside. And for the first time since his wife's funeral, Michael felt something stir beneath the layers of numbness. A tug of empathy, raw and human. That single awkward moment, born of a child's honesty in a supermarket aisle, would soon tear open lives that had been quietly collapsing, and rebuild them in ways none of them could imagine. The snow had begun to fall harder when Michael loaded the shopping bags into the boot of his car. The streetlights glowed pale in the frost, and Oliver sat quietly in the back seat, tracing little shapes on the window with his finger. For once, he wasn't singing. "Dad," he said after a while, "Mum used to help people when they were sad. Maybe we could help her too." Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The child's voice, so simple, so sincere, echoed through him long after the car engine started. He had spent years learning to bury feelings behind meetings, reports, and silent dinners. But something about the woman in the queue had cracked that armor open. That night, after Oliver had fallen asleep, Michael sat in his study overlooking the city. Manchester shimmered below, a constellation of windows and headlights. The life he had built, glass, steel, and money, looked impressive from above, yet empty up close. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but didn't drink it. The silence pressed against him. He saw again the trembling hands placing coins on the counter, The child's quiet acceptance, the way shame had burned in the woman's eyes. Her name? C. Thorne, was still clear in his memory. On impulse, he opened his laptop and typed an email to a man he sometimes hired for discreet investigations, background checks, security reviews. Find me the contact details of a woman named Clara Thorne. Works for the NHS, possibly as a care assistant. No questions, no trouble. It's urgent. He hesitated before pressing send. It felt strange, crossing into someone's private world, but not half as strange as feeling alive again. The next morning, while the city thawed under a pale winter sun, an envelope arrived on his desk. Inside, a few printed pages. Clara Thorne, 28, single mother. Address, a small flat in Stockport. Occupation, healthcare assistant, night shifts, 60 hours a week. Daughter, Emily Thorne, age 7. Debt, 28,000 tons. Mostly hospital bills from Emily's pneumonia last year. 2 months behind on rent, no family support. Michael closed the folder and sat back. He had spent more than that on a single weekend business event. The thought made him sick. He could write a check and make it all vanish. But he knew that wasn't the answer. Charity, when wrapped in pity, felt like theft of dignity. That evening, as he set the Christmas table, 2 plates, too much food, too much silence, Oliver wandered in with his teddy bear. Dad, do we have to eat alone again this year? Michael looked at the table, at the untouched turkey glistening in the light. What if, he said slowly, we didn't? Oliver blinked. What do you mean? Maybe, Michael said, feeling something awaken inside him. This year, we share dinner with someone who needs it more. Outside, the snow softened to a quiet fall, like approval from the sky. The streets of Stockport lay under a fragile blanket of snow that glowed faintly in the light of the lampposts. Michael parked his car a few houses away from the narrow brick building where Clara Thorne lived. The air was sharp with cold. The smell of chimney smoke lingered. He looked at the seat beside him. The foil-covered trays of roast potatoes, vegetables, sauces, and that golden turkey that suddenly meant more than all his Christmases before. Oliver balanced a basket on his lap. Inside were freshly baked rolls and a small red candle. Dad, are we really doing this? Yes, Michael said quietly. We are. He climbed the stairs, feeling strangely nervous, as though approaching something sacred. On the door, faded letters read Thorne, 3B. He knocked gently. A chain rattled behind the door, then a cautious voice. Who is it? Michael Weaver, he said. From the supermarket. Yesterday. A pause. Then the door opened a few inches. Clara stood there, her hair loosely tied, her eyes ringed with exhaustion and suspicion. Why are you here? I came to apologize, Michael said quickly, and to offer dinner. We cooked too much. I thought maybe you and your daughter could join us. Just a meal, nothing else? Clara's brows furrowed. We don't take pity. It's not pity, he said softly. It's company. My son and I usually eat alone. He thought it might be nice not to. Behind her, a small face peeked through. Emily, holding a half-finished drawing. Mom? That's the man from the shop. And the boy. Oliver waved shyly. We brought turkey. Something in that innocent tone broke through Clara's guardedness. She looked at her daughter's eager eyes, then at Michael. Tall, uncomfortable, genuinely trying. Her shoulders lowered. She unhooked the chain. All right, she murmured. But only if you come in properly. No standing in the cold. The flat was small but tidy. 2 plates waited on the table, one cracked, one mismatched. A little tree with paper stars stood by the window. When Michael placed the trays on the counter, the rich scent of roasted meat filled the room. Emily gasped, her joy so pure it almost hurt to watch. They set the table together. Clara's movements were brisk but careful, her hands sure, practiced. Hands of someone used to caring for others, not being cared for. When they finally sat down, 4 people at a table that barely fit 2, something unspoken settled between them. Not awkwardness, but a fragile sense of belonging. Emily took a bite and her eyes lit up. "Mom, this is the best turkey ever."
Clara laughed, covering her face with her hand, half from emotion, half disbelief. "Yes, darling, it really is." Michael met her gaze across the table. "I'm glad we didn't eat alone." And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and the warmth of strangers, he realized he hadn't felt home in years. Outside, the snow began to fall again. Not lonely this time, but gentle, forgiving. By the time they finished eating, the tiny kitchen had become a battlefield of plates, crumbs, and laughter.
Emily was showing Oliver her drawings. Stick figures, stars, and a crooked house with 4 smiling faces. "That's us," she said proudly. "You, me, Mum, and Mr. Michael," he corrected gently, smiling. Clara stood by the sink, washing dishes she didn't need to. Her heart was still pounding from the strangeness of it all. A stranger and his son bringing food to her door. It should have felt humiliating. Yet somehow it didn't. There had been no pity in his eyes, only warmth. When she looked over her shoulder, Michael was crouched beside Emily, helping her draw a Christmas star. For a second, Clara saw not the CEO he might be. His watch too expensive, his voice too measured, but simply a man who had known loss. After the children had run off to build a blanket fort in the living room, Michael leaned against the counter. "I'm sorry about the supermarket," he said quietly. "My son meant no harm." "I know," Clara replied, drying her hands. He was honest. Children usually are. Michael smiled faintly. Sometimes honesty is the only thing that saves us. The room fell silent. Outside, the snow tapped softly against the window. Clara finally said, "You don't have to explain why you came here. I understand more than you think. People help because they need to feel human again." He looked up at her, surprised. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" She hesitated. "Maybe, or maybe you just miss your wife." "Just miss," the words cut through him. Not cruelly, but with truth. For a heartbeat, the room seemed smaller, the air thicker. "You're right," he said. "I lost her 3 years ago. Since then, I've been existing. Tonight was the first time it felt different." Clara met his eyes. Something fragile passed between them. Understanding, quiet and real. Later, when Michael and Oliver left, the corridor felt too empty. Emily hugged her mother's waist. "Mom, can they come again?" Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe." That night she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's tired smile, the way he had looked at her not with charity, but with recognition, like someone seeing a reflection of their own loneliness. Across town, Michael sat in his dim living room, untouched wine on the table, the smell of roasted turkey still in the air. Oliver had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching Emily's drawing. 4 figures, hand in hand. Michael touched the paper gently. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like grief. It felt like a beginning. He looked out the window at the quiet snowfall over Manchester. Somewhere out there was a woman who reminded him what it meant to feel. And without meaning to, he whispered into the night, "I hope I see you again, Clara." January in Manchester was a cruel month. The snow had turned to grey slush, the mornings darker than the evenings, and most people hurried through the streets with their heads down, too tired to notice anyone. but Michael Weaver noticed her. He hadn't planned to. Officially, he was at St. Mary's Hospital for a physiotherapy appointment. Unofficially, he'd found out Clara Thorne worked there. Long night shifts in the geriatric ward. He stood in the lobby, trying to look casual, a man in a wool coat holding a clipboard he didn't need. When he finally saw her walk out of the staff area, hair tied back, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, something inside him stilled. She froze when she recognized him. "Michael?" He smiled awkwardly. "You caught me. I might have exaggerated the back pain part." Her lips twitched, somewhere between disbelief and laughter. "You came all the way here pretending to be a patient?" He shrugged. "Desperate times, Miss Thorne." She crossed her arms. "You really shouldn't be here." "Probably not," he admitted. "But I needed to see you to say thank you for letting us in that night." Clara sighed, lowering her guard slightly. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But I owe myself the truth. I haven't stopped thinking about you." Her expression faltered, a mixture of confusion, warmth, and fear. "Michael," she said quietly, "I'm a care assistant. I work 12-hour shifts, I barely sleep, and I have a child who thinks pasta is a luxury. Whatever you're doing..." "I'm just asking for coffee," he interrupted gently. "Nothing else." She looked away, biting her lip. For a long moment he thought she'd refuse. Then she nodded once. "Saturday, 2 o'clock, the Park Cafe near Piccadilly. The kids can play." Michael smiled, a real one this time. "I'll be there." Saturday arrived cold but bright, the kind of day when the sun felt like mercy. Michael was there too early, pacing by the frozen pond with a paper cup in hand. He changed outfits 3 times, finally choosing something ordinary. Jeans, jumper, nothing that screamed CEO. When Clara arrived with Emily, bundled in scarves, he forgot how to breathe. She looked different, not tired, not guarded, just herself. "You're early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," he confessed. Oliver and Emily ran off to chase pigeons, their laughter cutting through the winter air. Clara and Michael sat on a bench, steam curling from their cups. For a while, neither spoke. It was enough to sit there, the sound of children and the slow thud of their own hearts filling the silence. Then Clara said softly, "You know, I almost didn't come." "Why?" "Because every time life feels kind, I start waiting for it to hurt again." Michael looked at her, his voice low. "Maybe it won't this time." She met his gaze, and for the first time in years, she didn't look away. Their Saturday meetings became a quiet ritual. Every week, Clara and Michael met at the Park Cafe near Piccadilly, always with the children in tow. Oliver and Emily became inseparable, building snowmen, feeding ducks, swapping drawings. They laughed the way only children who'd never been hurt too deeply could. And each time, as the kids ran ahead, Clara and Michael lingered behind. 2 adults learning to speak again after years of silence. He never told her who he really was, not the CEO of a major tech firm, not the man whose company's logo lit up a skyscraper downtown. Instead he said, "I work in project management." It was easier that way. He wanted her to see the man, not the money. Clara, for her part, didn't ask too much. Maybe she was afraid to. She liked the version of him who bought hot chocolate for the kids, who carried spare gloves in his coat pocket, who listened instead of fixing. But secrets, even kind ones, have weight. One evening, after putting Oliver to bed, Michael sat at his desk staring at a folder. Her hospital's financial report. He had been planning something for weeks, quietly and carefully. A charitable fund under his company's name, designed to erase the medical debts of low-income NHS workers. It wasn't for publicity. It was for her. When the foundation was finally launched, it was done anonymously. Clara never saw his signature, only the letter from the hospital finance office a few weeks later. We're pleased to inform you that your outstanding medical balance has been cleared through the Hope for Families Fund. You are also being promoted to Senior Care Assistant. Congratulations. She called him that evening, her voice shaking. Michael, you won't believe it. The hospital just cleared my debts. Everything. And they gave me a promotion. I don't even know who to thank. He gripped the phone, his throat tight. Then, thank life, Clara, he managed to say. Sometimes it gives back quietly. She laughed through tears. You don't understand. I can finally breathe again. Emily can have new shoes. I can stop counting every pound. I can sleep. Michael closed his eyes. You deserve it. After they hung up, he sat in the dark, guilt gnawing at the edges of his pride. He had done something good, but not honestly. Because he knew that if she ever found out he was the reason, she might feel betrayed instead of grateful. Still, he couldn't stop himself from seeing her. Coffee on weekends, phone calls in the evenings, small moments that made life soft again. One Sunday afternoon, under the pale blush of early spring, Clara laughed, really laughed, for the first time since he'd known her. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes sparkled. Michael, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, I can't remember the last time I felt this happy. He smiled, but deep down he thought, you wouldn't say that if you knew the truth. Spring arrived early that year. The city parks bloomed with daffodils, and life seemed gentler for once. For Michael and Clara, weekends had become a thread of calm stitched through the chaos of their separate worlds. They no longer needed excuses to meet. The kids want to play, I'm near the hospital anyway, just a quick coffee. And though neither dared to name it, both knew what was growing between them. But truth, as it often does, waited for the right moment to break everything open. One morning in April, a letter arrived at Clara's ward. Invitation to the annual St. Mary's Charity Gala, sponsored by Weaver Technologies. The nurses buzzed with excitement. It was to be held at the Midland Hotel, the grandest hall in Manchester. The invitation was embossed in gold. You should come, Clara, said her colleague. You've earned it. New dress, free champagne, live a little. Clara hesitated. For once in her life, she could afford to go. The debts were gone, her hours stable, Emily thriving. Why not? She bought a simple black dress, elegant, modest, the kind her mother would have called respectable. When she mentioned it to Michael over coffee, he smiled too quickly. I'd love to, but I've got a business dinner that night, he said, eyes shifting away. Clara nodded, though something inside her faltered. Of course, work first. The night of the gala shimmered like a dream, crystal chandeliers, laughter that sounded like glass breaking. Clara felt small but proud, for once not as a nurse in scrubs, but as a woman who had survived. She was laughing with her colleagues when the stage lights dimmed. The hospital director stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, tonight we honor a man whose generosity has transformed this hospital. His foundation erased thousands in medical debt and funded a new pediatric wing. Please welcome the CEO of Weaver Technologies, Mr. Michael Weaver. The applause thundered, and Clara froze, because there he was, the man who had shared pasta with her child, who had walked through snow to her door, standing beneath chandeliers, dressed in a tailored suit, smiling with practiced ease. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble. The world blurred. His speech, the crowd, the cameras. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears and one thought echoing through her chest. He lied. Every kindness, every late-night call, every laugh, all wrapped in the shadow of deceit. Before the applause faded, Clara was already walking out. Outside, the cold night hit her like a slap. She heard footsteps behind her. "Clara, please." She turned sharply, tears hot on her face. "Don't. Not here." "Let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you decided what I needed without asking me? That you made me your secret charity project?" "It wasn't like that," he said, desperate. Her voice broke. "It feels exactly like that." She walked away, her heels clicking on the wet pavement, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, Michael stood in the rain, the applause from inside now sounding hollow, like a punishment. For days after the gala, Michael couldn't sleep. The echo of Clara's voice haunted him, not the anger, but the hurt beneath it. He had faced investors, ministers, entire boards of directors without flinching.
But one woman's disappointment had broken him more than any failure ever could. Oliver kept asking, "Dad, why don't we see Clara and Emily anymore?" And Michael had no answer, only silence. Across the city, in a quiet flat above a bakery, Clara battled her own war. Emily cried at bedtime. Did I do something wrong? Did Oliver stop liking me? Clara stroked her daughter's hair, forcing a smile. No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just need time.
But when Emily slept, Clara sat in the dark, staring at the drawing still taped to the fridge. 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a Christmas tree. She wanted to rip it down, but she couldn't. 3 weeks later, a knock came at the door. Clara opened it, expecting a neighbor. Instead, Mrs. Peterson, the elderly woman from downstairs, stood there with a small envelope in her hand. "Your girl gave me this to post, dear," she said with a wink. Clara frowned and unfolded the paper.
It was another drawing, this time with the words scrawled in a child's uneven hand. Mum, Michael, Oliver, Emily, friends forever. Tears burned behind her eyes. She closed the door and pressed the picture to her chest. For a long time she stood there, until her hands stopped trembling and her mind found clarity. She picked up her phone. Michael answered on the first ring. His voice was breathless, uncertain. "Clara? We need to talk," she said simply. "No shouting, no excuses, just truth."
That night he arrived at her flat, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. No tailored coat, no mask of composure. They sat opposite each other at the same table where they'd shared their first meal, the same table where everything had started. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "Not for helping, but for hiding it. I thought I was protecting you from pity, but really I was protecting myself from rejection. I was a coward." Clara looked down at her hands. "You made choices for me. You made me feel powerless again." "I know," he whispered, "but I don't want power. Not over you. Not anymore." Silence hung heavy, filled only by the hum of the old fridge. Finally Clara spoke. "I can't pretend it didn't hurt, but I also can't pretend it didn't matter. You changed our lives, Michael. Maybe not the way I wanted, but maybe the way I needed." She reached across the table, her hand trembling. He took it, afraid to breathe. "I don't know what comes next," she said, her eyes soft. "But I'm willing to try, for the kids, for us." He smiled, fragile, genuine. "No more secrets." "No more secrets," she echoed. Months later, the local paper printed a story. Weaver Thorn Foundation, hope for single parents. A photograph accompanied it. Michael, Clara, Oliver and Emily sitting on a park bench, the city blooming behind them. Below the picture, the caption read, "Sometimes family begins with a single honest sentence in a supermarket." As the first snow of December drifted past the window, Clara whispered, half to herself, "I never thought I'd be part of a story like this." Michael slipped an arm around her and answered softly, "And I never thought one sentence from my son could save my life."
They laughed quietly. Outside the snow fell, gentle, forgiving, as if the world itself exhaled.